Hey y'all, I'm Elisa and I am the Scrappy Wife behind ScrappyWife.com, and today I have a faith journaling process video for you. I'm actually going to work on setting up my traveler's notebook for pointing to Jesus. This is the June devotional from By the Well for God. It had been restocked last week, so I will definitely link all of the info below. And I know that this is going to be one of those devotionals that I definitely want to dig into and take a lot of notes about the connections between the Old Testament and the New Testament. So therefore, I am going to do the majority of my journaling in my traveler's notebook. And I want a similar process for each day. So I'm going to set up the entire 14 days in here. Of course, I can always go do additional journaling in my Bible, which I most likely will do, but this will be for where I take notes and study. So I'll just do a simple setup for each day, something that's consistent, that runs throughout the whole study, that I can go to and know kind of where I'm going to take notes and what I'm looking for. So I definitely will link everything down below. Otherwise, I'll put you on fast forward and let's go. I'm going to start with just adhering one of the Jesus bingo cards that you can get to coordinate with the kit on the front, just to identify the front and the purpose of the journal. I might embellish this more later, but I just wanted to go ahead and get started. And you'll see me, I've pulled out all of the Distress Oxide inks that I thought matched well with the kit. And I'm using a blush brush or a contour brush to just add color to the page really lightly. It gives it a very worn look, a very subtle color in the back, which I really like. And then for this page, I'm coming back with one of the domed blending brushes from scrapbook.com, which I absolutely love. And I'm using the arrow stencil available at By the Well for God to just provide a little bit of background. And I'm going to continue working throughout this. I've put it on super fast speed because I follow the same process to set up every page. And I found that for me, that's a way to not let this project get overwhelming. To pre-do your notebook can be really time consuming. And so I like to keep it simple. I follow a simple pattern for each page, which includes the dusting of the color in the background and then adding either some stamps or some stenciling, just focusing on the arrows because that's the motif that I want to run throughout my entire journal. I was also really loving second and third generation stamping. And if you don't know what that is, that's when you stamp an image right after you've inked up the stamp and stamp it once. That's first generation, which usually gives you a clear, bold image. And then each recurring stamp, if you don't ink up in between, kind of gives you, there's less color. The impression is not as great each time. You can see it kind of lessens as you go. And I like that look, especially for this particular devotional, just because of the vintage feel. It gives you kind of a worn look, which I think matches really nicely with the ephemera and with the other choices available in this devotional kit. So next I'm moving on to this crushed olive, which is coming out a little bit more yellow than before. And you can see I'm changing up the stenciling that time and putting it in the middle. You certainly could do the same pattern each time. There's no saying that you need to change it up. This just lets me use some of the different supplies. I love this arrow set. The stamp set I think is so versatile. And so I was anxious to use as many of them as possible. So I didn't repeat arrows at all. And you can see, oops, I dropped my stamp in the middle. So therefore I will be stamping in the middle. I just had to work with it because it was dropped and there was a stamp, and that happens to the best of us. And stamping, of course, you guys know my journey with stamping. I'm getting better. It's definitely getting better. But I'm still learning. And that one I was just fumbling around. So again, I am using just one blush brush and I'm wiping it off on a paper towel in between colors. I definitely need to go and get a few more brushes so I can kind of keep, green with green and blue with blue, but I'm not super worried about it right now. Just trying to get some background on the page. It's not messing up my Distress Oxide inks. And again, I am wiping it off on a paper towel in between, kind of dusting it off. You can see I'm starting to repeat colors now. I'm back to the dried marigold because I picked 6 colors from the Distress Oxide collection that I thought went really well. And so I'll just start repeating those now. And just so you know, a little background to decide on what I'm going to do for a devotional. Sometimes it's just I have a desire to try a mini album or to work in a different format. Or I take a look at the devotional when I get it. I kind of read through it quickly, look at some of the titles, look at the formatting of the questions, and kind of determine how I think it's going to impact me. Some are more prayerful, which is how I felt last month with questions. I knew that I would have a lot of prayers at the end of each devotion. This one, I think, is going to be, at least I think, a lot of information, a lot of just knowledge that I want to hold on to. And so I imagined myself taking more notes, like literally pen to paper, taking more notes, kind of focusing a little bit less on the art, which is why I decided to go with a traveler's notebook this time, just because I find I have more room to take notes in those than in my Bible. So I just kind of preview and I determine, and there's no right or wrong way to study. I know a lot of people like to keep it all in their Bible. Some others really want to focus on traveler's notebooks because they don't feel as comfortable working in the Bible. So it's up to you. There's no right or wrong way. There's lots of different ways to work through devotional, and I really encourage you to follow all of the members of the By the Will for God creative team. I will list them below in their Instagram handles. A couple of them have YouTube channels that you can see their processes, and we all work through it different ways. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about these devotionals, is that there's no need to copy exactly someone's page. Of course you can be inspired, and of course you can borrow techniques, and no one minds that, but there's a way that God is going to speak to you through the devotional, and that's going to come out differently in your art. So I highly encourage you to just be yourself, do your own thing, and have fun with what you're doing. Have fun studying the Word. It's not meant to be a drudgery. It's meant to be fun and to be inspiring. When I am setting up my traveler's notebook like this, I do generally work in batches, which means I'll do one part of the page and I'll do it on all of the pages. So I'm showing you here how I'm working on the background of each page. I'll just do the stamping that I plan to do once and then add a flip through for you. But start to end, setting up my full traveler's notebook probably took me about an hour and a half. So it was a time commitment, but in the grand scheme of things, not too bad, so that I'm ready to sit down and study when it's time. Okay, let me show you how I plan to set up each page. I'm going to do a series of stamping. I'm going to start with this little arrow stamp. This was in the extra goodie bag, I believe, when you ordered the kit and some extra goodies. And I love the spacing of it, and I think it's going to be perfect for writing a scripture reference in. So I'm going to put arrows on either side, kind of representing the Old Testament and the New Testament and how they point towards each other. So I decided to put those in black so that they really stand out. I'm not sure if I will use the tile alpha stickers or if I will write or stamp. Not sure how I will write those scripture references in. I could end up coloring in those arrows later, but I can decide. I just want to kind of have a framework. Now I'm pulling out this big Jesus Bingo stamp, and I cannot for the life of me find my large acrylic block. So you see me kind of improvising. This is the biggest one I have. It doesn't quite fit, and I'm going to just work with it. I really have been enjoying tone-on-tone stamping, which is why I went with that. So again, I'm going to use that same color ink and just have that over there to the left so I can mark it off kind of like a regular bingo board as we work through the scriptures. Now I have the spiritual prescription stamp, which I just love. I think it's so adorable. And I'm also running into the same problem of I don't have a large acrylic ink block at the moment. Mine is missing. So I actually just leave it on the backing, and I'm going to work with it just like that, use my fingers to press it down, and I still get a pretty good impression. I left it on the backing. I could use a stamp block to kind of press down on the back of that if I wanted to. So here I have those two kind of standardized. Now I love the title pointing to Jesus, and that's a sentiment that I really want to focus on throughout the whole devotional. So I will also stamp that on every single page. Again, sticking with the tone on tone, and then to balance the amount of tone on tone versus black stamping, I'm going to stamp the number of the day. So starting here with number 1, getting it all situated on my smaller acrylic block. And I will stamp out in black 1, and then I'll continue that pattern through the rest of the book. So this is kind of a formulaic way to set up my book, but it works really well for me and for how I like to study these devotionals. Okay, here is the final flip through of my journal. I will be setting up an intentions page here on the front, and then each page is set up very similarly. You have the day of the devotional over here written in or stamped in that chromatic alpha stamp. Then you have the 2 arrows pointing towards each other, and my plan is to write the Old Testament reference and the New Testament reference and how they connect to each other. And I also have the Jesus bingo card stamped on each page so I can mark off, kind of mark as I go the scriptures that we're referencing. I included the title pointing to Jesus just as a reminder that that is what all of this is all about, is pointing towards Jesus. And then each page also has the spiritual prescription there in the bottom right corner, and that is where I will specifically be putting a prayer. There is a lot of blank space in the notebook to take notes, to add additional art if I would like, to just fill it with thoughts and all kinds of tidbits from the devotional, quotes or songs. There's all kinds of things that are referenced that I know I'm going to want to dig into. And so that is why I like having this set up in advance so that I can dig straight in and focus on the notes. And then here at the end, I have a blank page set up for notes or a final reflection. So that is how I plan on working through pointing to Jesus from By the Will for God. And of course, I'll also have additional Bible entries, but the bulk of it will be in that Traveler's Notebook. Thank you for joining me today. All the supplies are linked down below. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider hitting that subscribe button as well as the bell notification button. I also have a link down below to join my email newsletter, so please consider signing up for that. I hope that you have a fantastic day, and as always, keep it creative.